Good afternoon. My name is Perry Franklin, and I will be serving as your moderator for the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion public meeting. Today, we will be talking about the Draft Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS, and the Draft Natural Resource Damage Assessment Restoration Plan, or RP, for the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project. Please keep in mind that both of these documents are still in draft form, and today we are requesting your feedback before making our final decision. Thank you for your interest in the proposed project and for attending today's virtual meeting. Whether you are listening in via telephone or your computer's audio, please note that we have all incoming audio muted at this time. If you are experiencing technical difficulties and would like to request assistance, please use the questions box located on the right-hand side of the webinar interface, and we will try to help you. We have a court reporter who will transcribe the entire meeting, including your comments. We're also joined by several language translators who will be introduced shortly. The recording of today's webinar will be posted on the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers webpage, along with a written transcript of the meeting in the near future. We will share the link with you via the chat box. The PowerPoint presentation and the transcript will also be posted on the Deepwater Horizon Trustee Council website. When you registered for today's webinar, you were asked if you would like to make a verbal comment. We have received a number of requests, and we responded to each person via email with instructions on how to make verbal comments to our listening panel. After the presentation portion of today's webinar, we will take your public comments. If you didn't make a request to provide a public comment before this meeting, that's okay, as it is not too late to do so. We will explain to you how to do this shortly. One last note. If you are joining us today only via phone and are not connected to the webinar system, you will not be able to make a comment during this meeting. If you are calling in over the phone and you're connected to a computer and would like to make a verbal comment, please call 866-211-9205. Let me say that number again, 866-211-9205 at any time before May 4th. We will review all methods for submitting public comments towards the end of today's webinar. Now I'd like to introduce you to the folks that you will be hearing from this afternoon, either live or via recording. In addition to myself, you will hear from Brad Laborde with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Brad Barth from the Louisiana Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, or known as CPRA, as well as Mel Landry, who represents the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. We also have several language translators with us today who will translate any public comments that are received in Spanish, Vietnamese, or Khmer. There will be more on this shortly. As a reminder, this webinar will be recorded. We thank you in advance for using respectful language during your public comment and for adhering to the 3-minute comment limit. All comments will be made available to the public and gathered as a part of the public record. The public comment period is open until May 4th. We are accepting public comments in a number of ways, including written comment by U.S. mail, electronic comments via our web-based system, voicemail on a free line that was mentioned earlier, and this afternoon during our public comment portion of the webinar, which will follow these presentations. Please note that you only need to submit your comment via one of these ways for it to become a part of the public record. Today's webinar we'll start approximately 35 minutes of video presentations, which cover details of the proposed project. Then we will move into the public comment portion of the webinar. The webinar will run for a total of 3 hours. The video will be shown shortly is in English, but if you would like to listen to the video in Spanish, Vietnamese, or Khmer, we have audio recordings available at toll-free numbers that will be listed on the following slides. Now, we will hear from each of the translators we have with us today. First, we will have Spanish, followed by Vietnamese, followed by Khmer. Ms. Soto?
Thank you. El seminario web de hoy comenzará con aproximadamente 35 minutos de presentaciones de video que cubrirán detalles del proyecto propuesto. El video se muestra en inglés aquí, pero si llama al 855-786-7103, escuchará la presentación en español. Luego del video pasaremos a la sección de comentarios del público acerca del seminario web. El seminario web de hoy será en inglés, sin embargo, estaré en el seminario web para traducir sus comentarios si es que deseará hacerlo en español. El seminario web durará un total de 3 horas. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nguyen?
Good afternoon. Hội thảo trên web của ngày hôm nay sẽ bắt đầu với khoảng 35 phút. Trình chiếu video bao gồm các chi tiết của dự án được đề xuất. Video được hiển thị ở đây bằng tiếng Anh, nhưng nếu bạn gọi 855 786 7103, bạn sẽ nghe thấy bài thuyết trình bằng tiếng Việt. Sau video, chúng tôi sẽ chuyển sang phần bình luận công khai của hội thảo trên web. Hội thảo trên web hôm nay sẽ bằng tiếng Anh. Tuy nhiên, tôi sẽ tham gia hội thảo trên web để dịch nhận xét của bạn nếu bạn muốn đưa ra bằng tiếng Việt. Hội thảo trên web sẽ diễn ra trong tổng cộng 3 giờ. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen and Mr. Tay.
សូមជម្រាបសួរសិក្ខាសាលាតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតនៅថ្ងៃនេះនឹងចាប់ផ្ដើមដោយបទបង្ហាញជាវីដេអូប្រហែលជា35នាទីដែលរៀបរាប់លម្អិតអំពីគម្រោងការដែលស្នើឡើងវីដេអូបង្ហាញនេះធ្វើតាមជាភាសាអង់គ្លេសប៉ុន្តែប្រសិនបើជាអ្នកហៅទូរស័ព្ទទៅលេខ អ្នកនឹងបានស្ដាប់ឮជាភាសាខ្មែរបន្ទាប់ពីវីដេអូយើងនឹងបន្តទៅផ្នែកស្ដាប់មតិសាធារណៈនៃសិក្ខាសាលាតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតនេះសិក្ខាសាលាតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតនៅថ្ងៃនេះយើងនឹងធ្វើតាមជាភាសាអង់គ្លេសប៉ុន្តែខ្ញុំនឹងចូលរួមសិក្ខាសាលាតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតនេះដើម្បីបកប្រែមតិរបស់អ្នកប្រសិនជាអ្នកចង់ផ្ដល់មតិជាភាសាខ្មែរសិក្ខាសាលាតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតនៅថ្ងៃនេះនឹងប្រព្រឹត្តទៅក្នុងរយៈពេលសរុប3ម៉ោងសូមអរគុណ Thank you.
Thank you to the translators who are with us today. At this time, we will transition to the video presentation.
Hello, and welcome to the public meeting presentation for the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project. My name is Brad Laborde. I'm the regulatory project manager for the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project and part of the Corps of Engineers review team in charge of developing this environmental impact statement, or EIS, here at the New Orleans district. This pre-recorded presentation is available to you on the Corps of Engineers Midbarataria project webpage. Myself and the Corps review team thank you for sacrificing your time to actively participate and provide your feedback on this draft EIS. Ideally, we would host these public meetings in person, but due to the ongoing public health crisis, we cannot at this time. Again, we thank you for your participation under these circumstances. There are 3 presentations available to you. Each will cover a different aspect of the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion Project review. The core presentation will identify engaged parties and outline our roles in this review, provide an update since the scoping period, show you how and where to submit your comments, and then I'll walk you through the draft EIS to help with your review. Brad Barth from the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, or CPRA, will present project-specific information about the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion Project. Mel Landry from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, has a presentation covering another key document the EIS will inform, the Draft Phase 2 Restoration Plan. NOAA is presenting on behalf of the Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group, or TIG. During our live virtual meetings, the pre-recorded presentations will run in the order shown here. It is important for you to understand the roles each of us play in this process. First is the public. Your feedback is valuable to us. In 2017, we held scoping meetings and asked, what would you like to see analyzed? Now we are coming to you once again with a draft EIS to ask, how do we do, so that we can consider your comments for the final EIS. The Corps is the lead federal agency in preparing the EIS. Due to the complexity of the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion Project review, the Corps has an independent third-party contractor with a team of subject matter experts to help analyze information and prepare the EIS. The Corps' role is strictly in a regulatory capacity. We are neither an opponent nor a proponent of the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion Project. We are tasked with making sure the EIS is based on the best available science, engineering, and professional judgment. Publishing the draft EIS is another milestone in our ongoing review. The Corps' decision to deny, approve, or proffer a least damaging alternative will not be made until after the final EIS. In addition to our independent third-party contractor, the Corps has assistance from cooperating agencies who also have teams of experts to assist with analyzing information and drafting the EIS. Many cooperating agencies also use the EIS to inform their laws and regulations. CPRA is a proponent of the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion Project. The project is part of their larger coastal master plan. CPRA is proposing to construct, operate, and maintain this project. The TIG is made up of a number of federal and state agencies, which includes some cooperating agencies and CPRA that will be using the EIS as a tool to help determine whether or not to fund CPRA's proposed project. The Corps is not a TIG agency, but we work closely with the TIG and other cooperating agencies to agree to the EIS schedule and processes leading up to the publication of the draft EIS. This shows some of our key milestones, starting with the public scoping process in July 2017. During the scoping period, you gave us great feedback, submitting over 870 comments. We took your comments and asked CPRA to respond to them, which required them to use a number of scientific models and draft a series of technical reports. CPRA's modeling information and technical reports were reviewed by the Corps and our independent third-party contractor, the TIG, and our other cooperating agencies. The Corps' independent third-party contractor then drafted the EIS chapter by chapter, based in part by CPRA's modeling and technical reports, the TIG and cooperating agency comments, and other best available science. The comment period from March 5th to May 4th, 2021 is your opportunity to submit your feedback and answer the question of how did we do? Your feedback will again be considered for the final EIS. Once complete, the final EIS will have another comment period and lead to the Corps record of decision or permit decision scheduled for spring of next year. Since I've mentioned it a few times now, let's walk through the Corps Midbarataria project webpage. On the right in purple, you will find materials related to our live virtual meetings under the Draft EIS Meeting Materials title. All core draft EIS public notices and links for the presentations can be found here. After our live virtual meetings, the recordings will be placed under the DEIS Meeting Recordings title. And under the Previous Meetings title, the 2017 Scoping Meeting presentation is available in case you need a refresher about the Corps' regulatory involvement or a better understanding of the EIS process. On the right in green, we have information about ways to submit your written and oral comments. I will show you the comment portal on the next slide. Below that in gold, you will see EIS documents. It is where the entire draft EIS and 2017 scoping report are stored. If you click Draft EIS, a box will open as shown in the callout. Place your cursor over the chapter you wish to review and click. Shortly after, a PDF version of that chapter will open. At the bottom here, I provided the link, but if you Google Corps Midbarataria, the top result should be this page. The second result should be another link shown here for the permitting dashboard. This example is for another project, but it gives you an idea of what to expect when you access the comment portal. It will have a project page first. If you click the Comment Now box, it will direct you to another page where you can enter your name, location, and comment in the available fields as shown here. Please notice that the comment portal is located on the National Park Service website. We are using this site because it helps us manage and sort the comments you submit for the draft EIS and restoration plan. The Corps and the TIG have full access to the material submitted here in real time, so you should have no concerns using this for your commenting. Now that I've discussed the engaged parties, updated you on our milestones, and showed you how to navigate the Corps Midbarataria project webpage, I'll turn it over to Brad Barth and Mel Landry for their presentations.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Brad Barth, the Mid-Basin Sediment Diversion Program Manager with the Louisiana Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority. Today, I'll be sharing some information specific to the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion Project. As I mentioned, I'm with CPRA, the state of Louisiana's single state agency responsible for spearheading all effort related to coastal protection and restoration. This includes developing Louisiana's Coastal Master Plan, which is a tool that helps the state prioritize funding and the implementation of coastal restoration projects across our coast. Sediment diversions are the cornerstone projects of the master plan, designed to reconnect the Mississippi River to our starved basins and reestablish the natural land building processes that originally built our delta. There are numerous factors that have contributed to Louisiana's land loss crisis. As some of you know, our state has lost over 2,000 square miles of land since the 1930s. Barataria Basin, the proposed project location, has actually experienced some of the highest rates of land loss in the world. There are several causes for our land loss, including sea level rise and subsidence, where the water level in the Gulf continues to rise as our land continues to sink, as well as other effects of climate change. Barataria Basin is also home to some of the wetlands that were most heavily oiled during the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. The extensive oiling and subsequent response activities significantly accelerated land loss in this area. Other man-made contributions, like privately owned projects and oil and gas canals, have caused land loss. And probably most importantly, our current levee system, which protects our communities, has cut off the Mississippi River from depositing sediment, nutrients, and fresh water into our basins. This natural land building process, where the Mississippi River deposits sediment, sands, silts, and clays to strengthen and nourish our marshes, is how coastal Louisiana was built in the first place. As you can see here, when we built our current levee system, the red lines on the map on the right, we restricted the river from strengthening and building our marshes. A sediment diversion is designed to reconnect the river and reestablish the natural flow of sediment and nutrients out into our basins. Sediment diversions, including the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion, are projects the state of Louisiana has been planning and working on for decades. Plans to reconnect the river are not new, but planning for the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion picked up momentum in the 1980s with both state and federal agencies. By the late 2000s, significant sediment and river data collection efforts in support of sediment diversions began. This data collection continues to this day. In 2011, the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion was proposed at River Mile 61 to optimize the power of the river and the land building potential. In 2012, the Coastal Master Plan recommended the project as a priority. As such, CPRA embarked on the engineering, design, and permitting of the project. The 2017 Coastal Master Plan again recommended the project as a cornerstone project. Cornerstone projects are Louisiana's best tools to build and sustain land. The proposed project location is in Plaquemines Parish on the west bank of the Mississippi River at River Mile 61 near the town of Ironton. And here you'll see a visual rendering of what the project might look like once constructed. The Mississippi River is at the bottom of your screen, flowing from right to left, and the basin is located at the top of the screen. Features include an inlet basin in the Mississippi River, a gate complex consisting of a U-frame and a gate structure, a guide levee and channel system, and an outlet basin. During high river, sediment enters the inlet basin, flows through the gate complex, guide levees and channel, and through the outlet basin where the sediment is then slowed to begin deposition and formation of new land. The gate complex allows for control and closure of the diversion during critical times, such as a tropical storm or hurricane events. As such, the gate complex is integrated with our current levee systems. Other features include bridges for Louisiana Highway 23 and the New Orleans Gulf Coast Railroad. So, moving forward, it's important to understand all the coordinating agencies and entities involved in this process. CPRA is the agency in Louisiana responsible for planning, engineering, and design of the project. We work in close coordination with the lead federal agency, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, to provide them information as needed, where CPRA is the applicant for the Joint Section 10404 permit application. I will now turn it over to Mel Landry with the Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group, or Louisiana TIG, who will explain the Louisiana TIG's role in this process.
Hi, I'm Mel Landry, and I'm with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, commonly referred to as NOAA. In this presentation, I'll introduce you to the Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group and our role in the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion. The Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group, or LATIG, is the group of coordinating federal and state agencies responsible for overseeing the use of the Deepwater Horizon Natural Resource Damages Settlement dollars allocated to Louisiana. The Louisiana TIG drafted the Restoration Plan, which is the document that details the evaluation and recommendation of the LATIG to fund the construction of the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion to restore resources injured by the Deepwater Horizon spill. The Deepwater Horizon spill began nearly 11 years ago on April 20th, 2010, when the Deepwater Horizon drilling rig exploded off the coast of Louisiana and sank to the floor, a mile deep in the Gulf of Mexico, 50 miles off the coast of Louisiana. 11 workers on the rig lost their lives, and oil flowed from the seafloor for 87 days. The Barataria Basin was the epicenter of oiled wetlands. Oil worsened existing erosion, and efforts to clean up the oil resulted in additional wetland damage. The agencies that are now members of the Louisiana TIG, as well as other agencies in states across the Gulf, immediately began collecting data to determine the extent of the injuries caused by the spill. Even before the full extent of the damage was known, the agencies began work to restore the ecosystem through $1 billion in early restoration funds provided by BP. 5 years ago, in 2016, the agencies reached a settlement with BP and the responsible parties that provided up to $8.8 billion in funding to restore the natural resources damaged across the Gulf of Mexico by the spill. Over half of that funding, $5 billion, is allocated to the Louisiana restoration area and is managed by the Louisiana TIG. Of that $5 billion, over $4 billion are allocated to restoring and conserving habitat in Louisiana. This large investment in habitat in Louisiana is in recognition not only of the large impact in the state, but also the benefit that the restoration of that habitat can provide to the Gulf of Mexico ecosystem. Our work on Deepwater Horizon restoration is guided by the Programmatic Damage Assessment and Restoration Plan, which we refer to as the PDARP. The PDARP was part of the settlement and is the overarching restoration plan that guides the development of all other subsequent restoration plans. The PDARP does not state exactly what projects should occur where, but it does guide us in the selection of the types of projects that we might plan throughout the entire Gulf of Mexico region. The PDARP recognizes the potential value of large-scale sediment diversions in restoring the resources injured by the spill. Building on the framework provided by the PDARP, in 2018, the Louisiana TIG finalized a Barataria Basin Strategic Restoration Plan that identified a combination of restoration approaches that would support restoration of the injuries in the Barataria Basin. That plan identified 3 projects for further development and evaluation: large-scale Barataria marsh creation, Spanish Pass Ridge and marsh restoration, and the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion. Large-scale Barataria marsh creation and Spanish Pass Ridge and marsh restoration each underwent design and evaluation in subsequent Phase 2 restoration plans and have been funded for construction. Today, we're here to present to you and hear your input on the Phase 2 Restoration Plan 3.2 for the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion. The objectives of the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion are to restore injuries from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, to deliver fresh water, sediment, and nutrients to the Barataria Basin through a large-scale sediment diversion, to reconnect and reestablish sustainable deltaic processes between the Mississippi River and the Barataria Basin, and to create, restore, and sustain wetlands and other deltaic habitats. By redirecting freshwater, sediment, and nutrients from the Mississippi into the Barataria Basin, the diversion is projected to create or sustain over 17,000 acres of marsh at its peak. Based on the sea level rise scenario used in our evaluation, the total acreage created or sustained is reduced by year 50, but is still substantial. Critically, at that point, the marshes created or sustained by the diversion represent 20% of all the marsh that is projected to remain in the Barataria Basin. The wetlands created and sustained by the diversion will restore injuries caused by the Deepwater Horizon spill by creating habitat and supporting the many resources that rely on that habitat. Some of the key benefits of the diversion are comprehensive and sustainable regional ecosystem restoration. The diversion is designed to maintain created wetlands over a long period of time without additional construction. The diversion creates and protects coastal marshes that provide habitat and reduce storm surge during large storms. The diversion is anticipated to improve the effectiveness and longevity of other marsh restoration projects, including the nearby projects that work to restore the Barataria land bridge. The diversion will provide aquatic and terrestrial species benefits, including largemouth bass, red drum, Gulf menhaden, bay anchovy, white shrimp, and blue crab. It also provides recreational use benefits, such as duck hunting, bird watching, and fishing. A key to the success of the project is being able to monitor and adapt the project based on what we learn. There is no other project like this in the world, so our analysis of the project's potential effect is based on extensive computer and large-scale physical modeling that help us understand how the river, the diversion, and the basin work. Once the diversion is operating, we can also use data from the field to maximize project benefits and reduce adverse effects while still maintaining the project's objectives. Restoring a deltaic process that has been absent at this scale in the Barataria Basin for approximately 100 years is expected to result in significant changes to the ecosystem. In addition to the benefits I've discussed, some resources will experience collateral injuries caused by the diversion. In recognition of these, the Louisiana TIG is proposing a suite of stewardship measures to help address the effects on resources and communities. One of the most visible and most impacted resources will be bottlenose dolphins. Approximately 2,000 dolphins live in the Barataria Basin. These dolphins are expected to remain in the basin as salinities decrease with diversion operation. Exposure to low salinity water and other stressors is expected to reduce the annual survival rate for dolphins across most of the basin. The Louisiana TIG and CPRA have developed a suite of measures in anticipation of impacts to dolphins and to meet the requirements of legislation that directed NOAA to issue a waiver under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. The effects on dolphins will be monitored beginning with baseline data collection before operations. To help support dolphin stocks across the state, the Louisiana TIG will fund efforts to reduce stressors, as well as continued funding of the statewide marine mammal stranding network. With data from operations, CPRA will evaluate the potential to modify operations to reduce impacts to dolphins while meeting project objectives. Lastly, funding will be set aside as a contingency to support response to potential unusual mortality events, or UMEs, that could be declared based on dolphin deaths in the Barataria Basin. Some fishery resources of commercial value will also be impacted. Due to salinity changes in the basin, brown shrimp and oyster populations will be reduced and/or relocated. It's worth noting that some changes to these resources would continue to occur without the project as current trends continued in the basin. But with the projects, these effects will be accelerated. Measures to address impacts to oysters include establishment of new public seed grounds, providing culture material for public and private growing areas, enhancement of oyster broodstock reefs, and assistance with implementing off-bottom culture techniques. For shrimp, efforts include provisioning of vessel refrigeration to improve catch quality and value, and funding gear improvements to increase efficiency. For both fisheries, investments will be made in training to improve existing business or transition to new careers, and funding of marketing to improve value of catch. Through other restoration planning, the Louisiana TIG has already committed $26 million to oyster restoration, including development and operations of the oyster hatchery on Grand Isle, development of a brood reef program, and past and future placement of culture material on public seed grounds. Diverting water into the Barataria Basin will increase water levels and is expected to impact communities outside of levee systems. Subsidence and sea level rise are predicted to increase flooding in most of these areas to nearly year-round by 2027, even without the diversion. But diversion operations are anticipated to result in more frequent inundation in the near term. For example, at Grand Bayou, proposed project operations are projected to increase the number of days of flooding by 45 days per year in 2030, but by only 5 days per year in 2050 in comparison to the future without project. Because most homes outside the levee systems are elevated, it's not anticipated that operations will flood structures, but will cause more frequent inundation of roads, docks, and other infrastructure, like sewage treatment systems. To address impacts, the project includes funding to raise homes, roads, and improve community infrastructure, and to address needs on individual properties such as docks and septic systems. CPRA is also proposing voluntary easements in communities outside of levee systems to compensate owners for property impacts. CPRA is open to discussion regarding fee acquisition of property if requested by the landowner. Lastly, data from operations will be used to evaluate operational regimes that limit impacts while meeting project objectives. This is an overview of the process we've discussed today, from the beginning of our work on the PDARP through the release of this draft Phase 2 restoration plan. Based on public input, we'll release a final restoration plan that will incorporate the feedback we get from you during this public review period. In parallel with our Deepwater Horizon restoration planning process, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has led the development of a draft environmental impact statement, or EIS, as part of their permit process. You'll learn more about that in their presentation on the draft EIS. We want to hear from you. You can submit comments on the restoration plan through the web address, mailing address, or phone number listed on this slide. Unless specified otherwise, or applicable to only one document, any comments submitted will be considered in the Louisiana TIG restoration plan and the EIS, so you only need to submit your comment once. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Brad and Mel. Now that you are up to date on the project details and the draft Phase 2 restoration plan, I'll explain the draft EIS in more detail. The draft environmental impact statement for the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project is approximately 1,600 pages. It is a very large document with material that can get technical at times. Some of you may read the draft EIS from cover to cover, but most of you will have interest in only a couple areas of the document. By going through what is available to you in each chapter of the draft EIS, I hope to make finding what you wish to review a little bit easier. First is the table of contents. Use it as your guide to the draft EIS. Each chapter is broken into sections and then more specific subsections like the example for Chapter 3 shown here. Notice that the page numbers begin with the chapter, 3 in this case, then the page number where the topic begins. The table of contents also includes the page numbers to all of the tables and figures in the draft EIS. It also includes the list of appendices. Next is the executive summary. The executive summary describes the proposed action, lists the purpose and need along with the alternatives, analyze potential environmental impacts. The executive summary is intended to be a non-technical and condensed version of the draft EIS. If you plan to comment or have an interest in the proposed project, you may want to begin your review with this section of the draft EIS. Reading it may give you all the information you need, or it can help you flag chapters and sections of the draft EIS you may want to review in more detail. Chapter 1 establishes the draft EIS purpose and need. The purpose and need statement is considered to be a foundational piece of the document because it helps determine which alternatives will be carried forward in the EIS analysis. As we have discussed, this draft EIS serves many different agencies, but for the Corps, the meat of the purpose and need statement is underlined for you here. You can also reference Chapter 1 for project background and history, a summary of previous studies, a list of Corps of Engineers civil works projects within the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project area, EIS scope and relevant issues, and a list of agency roles and responsibilities. Chapter 2 is where you will find information about the alternatives evaluated in the draft EIS. It explains how the Corps, in coordination with the TIG and cooperating agencies, developed a screening criteria to evaluate a wide range of alternatives, including coastal restoration methods, project locations, flow capacity, and operational triggers to arrive at the range of alternatives shown here. The draft EIS carries forward 6 alternatives and the no action alternative for further analysis. The 6 alternatives are all sediment diversions at variable maximum flow rates. A variable flow up to 75,000 cubic feet per second, which is CPRAs, or the applicant's preferred alternative. A variable flow of up to 50,000 cubic feet per second, and a variable flow of up to 150,000 cubic feet per second. Marsh terracing in the outfall area was an alternative considered for each flow capacity. I included a marsh terracing example over to the side for you, but in general, they are designed to be little sediment catchers. Chapter 2 also includes a comparative summary of all the potential impacts for each alternative. If you are a casual reviewer, after the executive summary, this table, Table 2.9-1, will help you understand the construction and operational impact determinations for each alternative listed here. The Affected Environment chapter gives a description of the existing conditions and trends in the project area, which may be affected by each alternative. It establishes a baseline that we can then use to evaluate impacts in Chapter 4, the Environmental Consequences chapter. Chapters 3 and 4 are broken down into 22 distinct resource areas as listed here. The Environmental Consequences chapter is perhaps the most important chapter of the draft EIS because it explains the potential positive and negative impacts for each sediment diversion alternative in comparison to the trends and conditions from Chapter 3. Chapter 4 is where you would go if you want a more technical explanation of the proposed project's direct, indirect, and cumulative impacts during construction and operation. In the draft EIS, construction impacts are considered over a 5-year time frame. The operational impacts spanned over a 50-year projection. Impacts are assessed for both context and intensity. Context helps you understand the duration of an impact and uses terms like temporary, short-term, long-term, and permanent. Intensity helps you understand the severity of an impact and uses terms like no impact and negligible, minor, moderate, or major impacts. For each resource, the context and intensity is defined, followed by the analysis of each alternative in comparison to the no action. Each section ends with the impact determination. In addition to impacts, Chapter 4 includes a mitigation summary outlining CPRA's proposed avoidance, minimization, and mitigation measures. By now, you've heard a lot about the core permit decision and the TIG funding decision, but there are a number of other laws and policies the draft EIS will inform. Some examples include the Endangered Species Act, Fish and Wildlife Coordination Act, and the National Historic Preservation Act. Chapter 5 summarizes the means of compliance with all statutes, orders, and policies. Chapter 6 lists the names and qualifications of the individuals primarily responsible for writing the draft EIS. Chapter 7 discusses the past, ongoing, and future public involvement opportunities associated with this review. Also, the draft EIS is littered with acronyms. Chapter 8 has a list of all of them in alphabetical order for your reference. And Chapter 9 is the index, which gives page numbers where keywords and topics can be found throughout the draft EIS. I like to think of Chapter 10 and the appendices as our way of showing our work. Chapter 10 gives a reference list of all the best available science and literature used to help with the analysis and drafting of the EIS. The appendices are approximately 6,000 pages of 20 technical reports, studies, and analysis that was considered when drafting the EIS. The modeling and technical reports that I mentioned today earlier by CPRA can be found in this part of the document. Before I wrap up, I want to remind you that the draft EIS for the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project is a large document that can be technical. It is available for the casual reviewer with the executive summary, comparative summary of alternatives table, and the table of contents to help you find areas in the draft EIS of your interest. From there, it ranges in complexity as you read through the draft EIS chapters, ending with Chapter 10 and the appendices for those who really want to dig deep into the analysis. In conclusion, I want to thank you for your participation and remind you that your comments play an important role in our process. So please send us your feedback by May 4th, 2021, by either the comment portal we discussed earlier, by traditional mail to the Corps of Engineers, and if you prefer to provide oral comments, please leave a message at 211-9205. Thank you.
And thank you to all of the speakers who recorded those presentations. If you'd like to watch the videos again, they are available on the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers website at the link that is now being circulated in the webinar chat. Now we're going to start the public comment portion of today's meeting. When you registered for the webinar, we asked you if you wanted to make a comment during the meeting. We currently have 4 people signed up to give comment so far. We will keep the webinar running for public comment for the next 2 hours or so. If you did not sign up to speak, but would like to do so, please simply type your name into the questions box at this time. Again, if you initially did not sign up to give public comment, but would like to do so, and we invite you to do so, simply go to the questions box and type in your name, and we will put you into the queue. I'll pause at this time and give our interpreters a chance to give instructions in Spanish, Vietnamese, and Khmer. Ms. Soto, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Ahora comenzaremos la sección de comentarios del público de la reunión. Cuando se registró para el seminario web, le preguntamos si quería hacer un comentario durante la reunión. Durante las siguientes 2 horas o más, continuaremos con el seminario web para comentarios del público. Llamaremos a la persona por su primer nombre y al mismo tiempo el nombre de la siguiente persona en lista, de modo que tenga algo de tiempo para prepararse. Cuando llamemos su nombre, quitaremos el modo mudo de su línea y tendrá 3 minutos para hablar. Gracias.
Thank you. Mr. Nguyen.
Thank you. Bây giờ chúng ta sẽ bắt đầu phần bình luận công khai của cuộc họp. Khi bạn đăng ký hội thảo trên web, chúng tôi đã hỏi bạn có muốn đưa ra nhận xét trong cuộc họp không? Chúng tôi sẽ tiếp tục chạy hội thảo trên web để lấy ý kiến công chúng trong 2 giờ tới hoặc lâu hơn. Chúng tôi sẽ gọi tên của người đầu tiên và đồng thời tên của người tiếp theo trong hàng để bạn có một chút thời gian chuẩn bị. Khi chúng tôi gọi tên bạn, chúng tôi sẽ bật tiếng đường dây của bạn và bạn sẽ có 3 phút để nói. Tôi sẽ trực tiếp dịch nếu bạn cho ý kiến bằng tiếng Việt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen and Mr. Tay.
ជំរាបសួរ ឥឡូវនេះយើងនឹងចាប់ផ្ដើមកម្មវិធីផ្នែកស្ដាប់មតិសាធារណៈនៃកិច្ចប្រជុំនេះនៅពេលដែលអ្នកចុះឈ្មោះចូលរួមសិក្ខាសាលាតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតនេះយើងបានសួរថាតើអ្នកចង់ផ្ដល់មតិក្នុងអំឡុងពេលប្រជុំឬអត់ប្រសិនជាអ្នកមិនបានចុះឈ្មោះបញ្ចេញយោបល់ហើយចង់បញ្ចេញយោបល់ក្នុងពេលនេះសូមបញ្ចូលឈ្មោះអ្នកនៅក្នុងប្រអប់សំណួរយើងនឹងបញ្ចូលឈ្មោះអ្នកទៅក្នុងឈររងចាំនិយាយឲ្យយោបល់យើងនឹងបន្តសិក្ខាសាលាតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតសម្រាប់ស្ដាប់មតិសាធារណជនក្នុងរយៈពេល 2 ម៉ោងយើងនឹងហៅឈ្មោះបុគ្គលទី 1 និងបុគ្គលឈ្មោះបន្ទាប់ក្នុងជួររងចាំដើម្បីឲ្យអ្នកមានពេលខ្លះក្នុងការត្រៀមចំខ្លួនចាំនិយាយនៅពេលយើងហៅឈ្មោះអ្នកយើងនឹងបើកសំឡេងខ្សែទូរស័ព្ទរបស់អ្នកហើយអ្នកមានពេលរយៈពេល 3 នាទីសម្រាប់បញ្ចេញយោបល់របស់អ្នកសូមអរគុណ Thank you.
Thank you, translators. At this time, I'd like to remind you that representatives of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, CPRA, NOAA, and other Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group members, including the U.S. Department of the Interior, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, are on the webinar to listen to your public comments. The representatives will listen to your comment. However, panel members may provide clarifications and additional information. As a reminder, All attendees are muted automatically. We will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. Also, if you are viewing the webinar and have called in using a PIN and are planning to speak, you must enter your individual audio PIN with a # in front and after the PIN. Note, this PIN is different than the access code. Please also follow any notifications to unmute yourself. As shown on the slide, if you're using the phone, please make sure your computer's audio is not selected. We will call the first person's name, and at the same time, we will call those who are in line so that you can have a little bit more time to prepare. When we call your name, we will unmute your line and you will have 3 minutes to speak. I thank you in advance for respecting the 3-minute rule. Again, please state your name if you're representing an organization, and please state the name of the organization if you're doing so. At this time, we have 4 individuals who have signed up to speak. They are in this order: David Muth, George Howard, Mark Reyes, and Randy Gegenheimer. David Muth will be first, and if you'll state the name of your organization, Mr. Muth, we would appreciate it. Please proceed with your public comment.
Hi, this is, one second. Good morning, everyone. My name is David Muth. I live in New Orleans. I'm the director of the Gulf Program for the National Wildlife Federation. The National Wildlife Federation will be providing detailed written comments. On behalf of NWF and our over 6 million members and supporters, I want to say that NWF considers this project to be one of our highest national priorities for restoration. We consider the restoration of the Mississippi River Delta to be on a par with restoration efforts elsewhere in the country, often better known, including those in the Everglades, the Great Lakes, the Chesapeake. No restoration effort now underway is more important for wildlife than this one, and no one single project will have greater positive impacts for wildlife, wildlife habitat, and ecosystem sustainability. NWF urges the Corps to issue permits for the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion and the preferred alternative, and we urge the Natural Resource Damage Trustees to fund the construction of the project, its operation, and adaptive management, and the mitigation proposed in the Trustees' restoration plan. We are fully cognizant of the fact that ecosystem change at the scale contemplated here will have impacts on people and communities and on some estuarine organisms. We commend the state and the trustees for identifying those impacts and urge them to continue to work with affected individuals, families, and communities to mitigate those impacts and to monitor and adaptively manage operations for affected wildlife and fisheries resources, guided by the ultimate critical purpose of the project. I now want to take off my NWF hat and make the following personal comments. In my decades of reviewing NEPA documents and government plans, I have never seen a more comprehensive analysis, and I commend the team for their hard work. Of course, given the decades of in-depth scientific analysis that led to the decision to build a diversion near this site, this is hardly surprising, but still commendable. About 40 years ago, like many citizens of Louisiana, I became aware of the dire straits and the dire rates of land loss that our coast was experiencing. Like many, I have watched the Barataria Basin dissolve before my eyes, and I have experienced the increasing ferocity of hurricanes hitting our coast. Like many, I lost a home in 2005. I've been waiting that 40 years for a project like this that is conceived and built at the scale necessary to begin to address the problem. The Mississippi River built the Delta, and only the river can rebuild it. Let's get started. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Muth, and we'll accept that that positive response on the quality of the document and pass that on to our stellar third-party contractor team here at the Corps.
Thank you very much for your comment. The next individual to give public comment is George Howard. followed by Mark Reyes. Mr. Howard? Please unmute yourself, Mr. Howard. If you'll see the microphone icon, if it's red, if you'll just click on it one time and it'll turn to green, you'll be ready to go.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Please proceed. And if you're representing an organization, if you'll state the name of the organization, please proceed.
Yes, sir. My name is George Howard, and I'm CEO of Restoration Systems, mitigation banking firm headquartered in Raleigh, North Carolina, who is the sponsor of the Jesuit Bend Mitigation Bank. About 10 miles north of you in very similar landscape position as the planned project. I'd like to second Mr. Muth's comments that it is an extraordinary document and an extraordinary undertaking y'all have begun. Irregardless of the diversion politics that surround it, you should be saluted for all the work that's gone into the permitting and planning thus far. Obviously, my concern as a mitigation banker is the opportunity to sell credits to the project. And we believe that the Jesuit Bend Mitigation Bank is actually an ideal offset for particular project impacts. My curiosity, and we can ask questions, correct? Is this purely comment, or can you ask questions, or is that inappropriate?
Just proceed as you feel free.
Yes, we feel comfortable where the Corps of Engineers developed in very, very similar levied lands to build the New Orleans to Venice levee. And in 2018, they determined that their impacts to wet pasture would need to be mitigated with credits, fresh to intermediate salinity credits, and made a fairly large purchase from the Jesuit Bend Mitigation Bank from exactly the same type soils. After that, a large LNG firm, Venture Global, developed in those same soils again, and they were allowed to mitigate with bottomland hardwoods. We are curious whether the 404 process will be consistent with the Corps' own determination that wet pasture be mitigated with fresh to intermediate marsh, because that is that's what Jesuit Bend has. It's an honor to follow Mr. Muth. He has been out to our project and counted many, many birds out there. We have been totally transparent about what we've done at Jesuit Bend, but if you're not aware of it, we moved 1.3 million yards of sand off of the about a half square mile box in the river at mile 69, pumped it 5 miles, pumped it up and over the federal levee, dug a tunnel underneath Highway 23 and the New Orleans to Venice Railroad up through a neighborhood, and then put it behind the Ollie Pump Station, created the newest 300 acres of land in Louisiana. We'd like that investment respected and hope that y'all will seek pricing and availability from us as soon as possible, and we promise to be very fair in the pricing. But we're very curious, again, whether wet pasture will be mitigated as the Corps has mitigated in the past with fresh to intermediate marsh. Again, thank you very much, and I look forward to participating entirely through the process and plan to have extensive and perhaps expensive comments by May 5th. Thank you very much.
Mr. Howard, thank you for your comment. Your questions about mitigation are noted, and that's something that we can further address with the final. And again, we'll take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment, Mr. Howard. The next 4 individuals will come in this order: Mark Reyes, Randy Gegenheimer, Mary Tucker, and Catherine Poole. Mr. Reyes, you're next to give public comment. Please proceed.
Thank you. Can I be heard?
You can be heard.
Thank you. So I appreciate the opportunity to comment on the draft environmental impact statement. I understand the purpose and the need for the Midbarataria sediment diversion. And I want to say I'm supportive of it, and specifically am concerned with the potential for impacts to cultural resources. I should pause and add that I'm speaking as an individual, as a resident of Louisiana, but I am also employed by the University of Louisiana at Lafayette and I'm with the Louisiana Public Archaeology Lab. I'm not speaking on behalf of the university, however. Again, I'm particularly concerned with specific impacts to cultural resources and the mitigation of those adverse effects. So I've paid specific attention to those portions of the draft environmental impact statement. As someone had mentioned, I've gone through specifically those actions. To summarize first, in case I don't get to everything, I'm specifically concerned that alternative mitigation and monitoring of the resources in the DEIS are not sufficient response to the ongoing impacts and the potential adverse effects of the Midbarataria sediment diversion, specifically the information that might be provided by archaeological sites, including National Register of Historic Place eligible historic properties, but also a regional programmatic analysis of sites. I'll just say a few words about the sections that deal with cultural resources. Chapter 3 specifically deals with or takes into account potential effects on historic properties, which are defined by the National Register of Historic Places. Typically, archaeological sites are found to be eligible based on the information they can provide. That's important. Also important is archaeological integrity, that the sites are not entirely redeposited or that they have integrity of location to be able to provide that information. The DEIS recognizes the difficulty of distinguishing the potential effects of the proposed undertaking from all of the ongoing impacts that have been going on for well over a century. I see my time's running out, so I'm going to drop down to some comments. I'm concerned that the undetermined National Register eligibility of some sites, that is their undetermined eligibility, is being equated with ineligibility. For example, 21 of the 31 sites, or 2/3, are presumed to be inundated or destroyed and are consequently ineligible. I'm also concerned that the lack of archaeological integrity makes individual sites ineligible, but overlooks the fact that sites regarded as ineligible together might contribute information from a regional programmatic approach. I see my time is up. Can I have another 60 seconds?
What?
I will be more than happy to put you back in the queue.
Okay.
At this time, we'll go ahead and proceed, but we'll put you back in the queue. Ms. Laborde?
Yep. Yeah. Thank you for that comment. Sorry, I was processing what you were saying as your time ran out. So, yeah, I would encourage you to hop back in line here. We have 2 hours, so you know, I'd like to fully hear you out this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Mr. Reyes. At this time, we will proceed with Mary Tucker, followed by Catherine Poole, and then we're going to go back to Randy Gegenheimer. Ms. Tucker, you're now up to make public comment.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Mary Tucker, and I am a resident in Myrtle Grove, and I am not speaking on behalf of the association. I am speaking for myself and my family. And while I agree with Mr. Muth from the National Wildlife and Fisheries, the first man, we do need to rebuild our marsh. However, that being said, not at the expense of my little community. I spoke yesterday, so I am not in favor of the diversion. The reason being, we will have water on our property more days than not when the diversion is operating. When I bought and built in Myrtle Grove, everything was built to code. It was a way of life. The man before me spoke about artifacts and culture. Well, what about the culture of Louisiana way of life. I've raised my children. I'm now raising the next generation of my family. I chose to invest money outside of the levee protection, so I accepted that responsibility for storms, but not man-made damage. Kids can ride bikes in the street, they can play on the land, we drive up to our camps, they fish off the dock, catch crabs off the dock, and shrimp. When this diversion is operational, that will affect the fish. Again, my land will probably be inundated with water, so raising the road, hey, that will help me get there, but once I get there, it's covered in water. Yesterday when I spoke, I was directed to go to, I think it was 4.27 mitigation, and where I uncovered that Wilkinson Canal will probably be affected, and they might have to redirect how watercraft will operate in the area. Again, that will take away my waterfront community. Also, I'm a little disappointed that there's 33 million for shrimp and oysters, approximately 20 million for dolphins, but nowhere is it mentioned the amount of money for mitigation to property owners who have invested blood, sweat, tears, and money into property. Thank you. I do think the marsh does need to be rebuilt, but we have to look at other ways. And that's all I have to say. I appreciate and I respect the time that I was given. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ms. Tucker. And yeah, you had mentioned that this is your second time around, so you're participating once again. And I appreciate you providing your input for a second time here. And you're going to hear this again because we told you yesterday, but just for today's group, additional information on flooding can be found in Chapter 4.20. That's the Public Health and Safety section. Community impacts related to flooding is also in Chapter 4.13.5. That's the socioeconomic operational impacts section. You can read more about the proposed mitigation measures in Appendix R of the EIS. That's the mitigation and MAM section. In addition to this, if you want to get a little bit more refined with your review, Table 4.20-2, it outlines the number of annual days there will be tidal flooding under the applicant's preferred alternative. So the project that we're here to talk about today, and the examples in that table cover Grand Bayou, Myrtle Grove, and Lafitte. So you may have already looked at that, but you know, just to let today's crowd know that that information is available to you. In addition to this, because we had some conversations after the call yesterday, CPRA is intending to hold community level meetings to further engage with the public. So I would urge you to reach out to them if you haven't received notification about those meetings. Those meetings would be independent of the core and the EIS process, but you know, after this process is complete with the public involvement, we are going to go back to CPRA and request that they provide information or further information about mitigation. So if you do have some direct interaction with CPRA, your feedback may feed into the response that we get from them. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tucker. For those of you who are participating in the webinar and you would like to give public verbal comment as our previous 5 individuals, simply go to the questions box and type in your name, and that will place you into the speaker's queue. Again, if you just simply go to the questions box and type in your name, that'll put you in a speaker's queue. At this time, we have next in the queue, Catherine Poole, followed by Mark Rays. Ms. Poole.
Hi, I'm Catherine Poole. I'm a climate scientist who works at Columbia, but I do not represent them. I represent myself. If your EIS states that Black and low-income communities will be highly and disproportionately impacted by a project, that is where exploration should end. Full stop. If your EIS states that dolphins will be harmed via this project more than were killed in the oil spill that it was designed to rectify, that is where it should end. If your EIS states that flooding will increase in areas that are already highly vulnerable and underserved as a result, that is where it should end. If your EIS states that wildlife will have their habitats destroyed on an expedited timeline, hurting not only the animals, but the ecosystems and people who depend on them for their livelihood, that is where it should end. If your EIS doesn't properly address the implications of diverting one of the most toxic and polluted rivers in the world into another ecosystem, that is where exploration should end. If your EIS doesn't properly address the fact that Louisiana is in the crosshairs of hurricanes multiple times a year, potentially delaying the timeline of this project, that's where it should end. If you don't address that these jobs are temporary and dangerous due to geographic vulnerability and heat concerns during the summer months, that's where it should end. If your EIS doesn't properly address that this project will be spending $2 billion just to be fully underwater by the end of the century, if not sooner, that is where it should end. We need to stop pretending that we have any meaningful control over what is about to happen to our coast through gray and green infrastructure. We must stop working against climate change, which is a losing battle, and start working with it. Use $2 billion to move people out of harm's way, not line the pockets of contractors, full stop. And please stop with the propaganda in media outlets because it's very transparent. This project is a direct threat to environmental justice. Why would we ever trust the Army Corps when they have shamelessly lied to the public for decades and are a large reason we are in the mess we're in because of their infrastructure failures? Why trust CPRA when their board doesn't represent or look like the people it is supposed to serve? And I really hope you take those comments to heart, because it is terrible that you think that Black and brown communities are expendable, because they are not. That you think wildlife is expendable, because it is not. You need to think more into this. It's really a matter of life and death, not only for animals, but for the livelihood of people.
Thank you for your comment. I can tell that the project is important to you, or not the lack thereof. But just to let the rest of the group know, I mean, the Corps, we're reviewing this in strictly a regulatory fashion. So we received an application from CPRA, and it's upon us to review that application fully, and then we'll take into consideration these comments as well as best available science, engineering, and practices to make that permit decision that you had mentioned. And that permit decision could be to issue the permit as proposed, deny the permit, or proffer one of the other alternatives that we're analyzing with this EIS. So again, I thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Poole. Next individual to speak is Mark Rays. Mr. Rays.
Okay, so thank you for being given a chance to speak a little bit more to talk about the cultural resources and the expected impacts. The draft environmental impact statement indicates there are no expected impacts on cultural resources within the APE for construction. That is because there are no historic properties that have been determined eligible for listing on the National Register. One of the key points I want to make is that information could also be obtained from sites in a regional approach rather than a piecemeal approach of site by site. Regarding the operational impacts APE, the larger area, there are numerous sites, and I had mentioned 21 previously recorded sites could not be relocated and are presumed inundated or presumed destroyed. They automatically become ineligible and are not considered. The adverse effects within the operational APE are considered for only 5 historic properties, which are regarded as eligible for listing on the National Register. I'm concerned that the undetermined eligibility is being equated with ineligibility, and that inundated and inaccessible sites are presumed to be ineligible merely because they are submerged and then inaccessible. Lack of integrity makes individual sites ineligible for National Register. This sort of piecemeal approach, I don't think is the right way to approach a regional scale project. After all, the APE are defined as geographic regions. To get to the draft programmatic agreement regarding those 5 historic properties, the programmatic agreement indicates on consultations and public involvement that the public has an interest. Members of the public and stakeholders should be considered. Well, the public at large has an interest in and can benefit from public education. I think public education is largely left out, which is ironic because it is the information potential of those sites that is deemed making them important or eligible for the National Register. Yet when it comes to public education, it's nearly absent. Again, information from individual sites as well as from a regional programmatic approach to cultural resources. Other consulting parties that could be added, public university archaeology programs that have an interest, a public interest in education, the Louisiana Archaeological Society as related to public interest in Louisiana's heritage, the Louisiana Archaeological Survey and Antiquities Commission, which advises the Secretary of the Department of Cultural Recreation and Tourism. I have some comments on the resolution of adverse effects, so I'll add my name to the queue and maybe I can get to those.
Thank you, sir. And yeah, I don't know what our queue's looking like, but yeah, I'd appreciate it if you circled back to continue your comment.
And so we want to remind everyone, if you are participating in this webinar and you would like to make verbal comment, that you can do so. And it is simple as going to the questions box and typing in your name. And so, Brad, I didn't know if you had any chat to go through at this time.
We're looking a little light on the chat. We did get an email that we can address. It was about the potential impacts to Mississippi Sound and aquatic life in Mississippi Sound. And I think our response to that is being that the Midbarataria Basin is west of the Mississippi River, it's not anticipated that there would be any impacts to Mississippi Sound or the nearby Chandelier and Breton basins. We did, oh, there was a second question here about the openings of the Bonnie Carey Spillway and how that may impact the Mississippi Sound. And Bonnie Carey Spillway is a separate project, so you may need to reference other material to find some more information there. But we did look at Bonnie Carey openings with respect to cumulative impacts for this EIS. That information can be found in Chapter 4, 4.25, where we have the cumulative impacts with this project in coordination with Bonnie Carey Spillway. Let's see, we did get a chat acknowledging the CPRA community meetings, so it does seem like there has been some outreach there from CPRA and further coordination for feedback to the applicant about mitigation and some of the issues that may happen and how to offset that if this project is approved and constructed. And that's it on my end, Perry.
Very good. I'd like to invite the translators to assist with this slide. Again, if you're on this webinar and you would like to give verbal public comment, you simply just need to type your name into the questions box to get into the speaking queue. Ms. Soto?
Ahora comenzaremos la sección de comentarios del público de la reunión. Cuando se registró para el seminario web, le preguntamos si quería hacer un comentario durante la reunión. Durante las siguientes 2 horas o más continuaremos con el seminario web para comentarios del público. Llamaremos a la persona por su primer nombre y al mismo tiempo el nombre de la siguiente persona en la lista, de modo que tenga algo de tiempo para prepararse. Cuando llamemos su nombre, quitaremos el modo mudo de su línea y tendrá 3 minutos para hablar. Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen.
Khi bạn đăng ký hội thảo trên web, chúng tôi đã hỏi bạn có muốn đưa ra nhận xét trong cuộc họp không. Chúng tôi sẽ tiếp tục chạy hội thảo trên web để lấy ý kiến công chúc trong 2 giờ đến hoặc lâu hơn. Chúng tôi sẽ gọi tên của người đầu tiên và đồng thời tên của người tiếp theo trong hàng để bạn có một chút thời gian chuẩn bị. Khi chúng tôi gọi tên bạn, chúng tôi sẽ bật tiếng đường dây của bạn và bạn sẽ có 3 phút để nói. Tôi sẽ tự tiếp dịch nếu bạn cho ý kiến bằng tiếng Việt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen and Mr. Tay.
ជំរាបសួរនៅពេលដែលអ្នកចុះឈ្មោះចូលរួមសិក្ខាសាលាតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតនេះយើងបានសួរថាតើអ្នកចង់ផ្ដល់មតិក្នុងអំឡុងពេលប្រជុំឬអត់បើសិនជាអ្នកមិនបានចុះឈ្មោះនៅពេលនោះហើយឥឡូវនេះចង់បញ្ចេញយោបល់សូមបញ្ចូលឈ្មោះអ្នកនៅក្នុងប្រអប់សំណួរយើងនឹងបញ្ចូលឈ្មោះអ្នកទៅក្នុងជួររងចាំនិយាយនឹងឲ្យយោបល់សូមអរគុណ Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tay. At this time, we've re-invited Mr. Reyes to come back into the queue. And Mr. Reyes, you can continue with your public comment.
Thank you. I will try to finish up here this last time. So I was talking specifically about the draft programmatic agreement in Appendix K of the draft environmental impact statement. And so I wanted to note that the public at large has an interest in public education, obviously, which I think is lacking from it. Other consulting parties I mentioned that should be added. I think that would be that would strengthen the public education component. Also on the assessment of effects or the resolution of adverse effects. There are 3 sort of legs to the resolution of adverse effects, which make up an alternative mitigation plan. The peer-reviewed publication of an ethnohistoric overview on tribes of the Barataria Basin. Well, ethnohistory involves archaeology as well as oral and archival sources. So it would make sense that an overview should draw on information from archaeology, and that could include a regional analysis. This does not appear to be included in the alternative mitigation plan. Rather, it would be sort of a summary of existing literature. The lack of such information in such an overview might raise questions in peer-reviewed scholarship, which would cause problems for the mitigation plan. Secondly, compilation of information for tribes on their history for future consultation. Again, it's unclear if such a database would include any new information on the sites, including the eligible sites that are going to be affected. Public information is the third part of the alternative mitigation, and a website is suggested or other accessible information or materials. Websites are great, but may have a limited effectiveness in public education. Again, I think support for public education, including Louisiana's universities that are teaching archaeology, I would recommend support for the Louisiana Archaeology Month. This is Louisiana Department of Cultural Recreation and Tourism's main means of educating the public on archaeology and Louisiana's heritage. I recommend support for public archaeology outreach initiatives that are absent. I would recommend support for public archaeology in K-12 and higher education. Overall, I would recommend an alternative mitigation plan that includes site monitoring and involves both APE, construction and operations, in a programmatic approach to regional analysis, such as a systematic archaeological sampling, including historic properties of undetermined eligibility as well as those determined to be eligible for the National Register. I've said my piece, and I hope it's of some value.
Quite valuable. I appreciate your feedback here, and by far you are more of an expert on NHPA than I am. But what I can do is take your comments today and any additional comments that you may provide up until May 4th, bring that back to our 106 folks, have them take a look at that information, because you know the consultation for 106 is still very much within the process. So we're working through that, and you've given us some things to consider today. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Reyes. I'm going to give this gentleman a shot. I think he is offline, but he may have called back in via a telephone and we cannot pick it up. Mr. Randy Gegenheimer, if I'm saying that correctly. If you can hear us, you can proceed with your public comment. Okay, we were just making sure we have all indication that you're offline. And so if everyone can familiarize themselves with this slide, if you're considering making public comment, this slide is of help. And it sort of gives you a walkthrough of what needs to be in place in order for us to receive your verbal public comment. If you just follow from left to right, making sure that you're connected to the webinar audio and have entered your audio PIN. And again, you have to use the pound sign, the 5-digit audio PIN, and then the pound sign. 2, click the phone icon and unmute. And of course, that where the 2 is pointed needs to be green. And then 3, if the organizer still cannot hear you, please make sure you're not directly muted on your phone if you're calling in via phone. And so those are just some helpful tips. If you're considering making a public comment and you were having some audio difficulty, those are some tips to walk you through a few of the troubleshooting items. This time, I think we'll just kind of hold tight for about 60 seconds and see if we have additional public that would like to make public comment. And if at the end of that 60 seconds, we don't have anyone who does, we're going to go in a break of approximately 15 minutes, which will typically give the chat time to repopulate, get individuals an opportunity to collect their thoughts. When we do go to break, the portal will remain open and you can still put your name into the questions box and the chat is still live. And then at 2:45 p.m., the cameras will come back on and we'll continue at that time. So we'll give it about a minute here to see if we have any individuals who like to go into the queue at this time. And again, I'll bring your attention to the URL that is on the screen currently, and that's where you can find these materials. So if you wanted to make friends and family and colleagues aware of the PowerPoint presentation that you received today, they can see it at this website, at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers website. And also just want to make everyone aware that this same meeting will take place on tomorrow evening. And so if there are individuals who are working right now and who would like to participate, there will be an evening webinar tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Okay. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and proceed to a break, and we will resume at 2:45 p.m. sharp Central. Thank you all. The portals will remain open if you want to put your name into the questions box to be in the speaker's queue. Okay, we want to thank everyone for your participation in today's Midbarataria Sediment Diversion virtual public meeting. The meeting started at 1 p.m. and will last approximately until 4 p.m. And this is the public comment portion of today's meeting. And so we encourage you, if you would like to make public comment, this would be that time of the meeting to do so. The slide that is currently up will give you further instructions on how to do that. We do have one individual who is in the speaking queue at this time. And so I'd like to turn to Ms. Cindy Coney, if I'm saying that correctly. You have 3 minutes to make your public comment. And if you are representing an organization, if you will state the name of the organization for the record. Please proceed.
Hi, my name is Cindy Keeney. I am a resident in Myrtle Grove, and I'm against the diversion, but not against saving our wetlands. I don't understand why this location is the only location for the project when there's several acres of vacant land very nearby the project on Highway 23 that would have a lot less impact on the parish people that live there. And also I see in the EIS about assisting property owners to elevate homes and other structures. So if they're going to run the diversion, what is it, approximately half the time of the year, what about the other half of the year? How are we going to access our boats when y'all raise our homes and boathouses so they're so high in the sky that we won't be able to access our boats because they're so far down? I mean, I'm not sure, what the solution is to remedy the problem, but I mean, we're hoping to get answers, which we haven't gotten any so far. And I mean, when I built down here, I knew we were outside of the levee system and could accept that if we had natural disasters. But I can't accept that my investment and my way of life will be totally altered for a man-made project. I hope y'all take all these comments into consideration, and we are looking forward to having a meeting next week with the CPRA that maybe they can give us some more information on it. Thank you.
Thank you. And earlier you had mentioned about alternatives. So just to remind you, it sounded like you had already reviewed that information, but just to let the group know, Chapter 2 is where we go into detail about alternatives. We don't only talk about the alternatives that we carried forward in the EIS, but we also talk about some of the restoration tools that CPRA and other agencies that do coastal restoration use, and why maybe some of those weren't carried forth for this review. And for more information about how we got to where we did, we kind of show our work in the appendix, and I believe that's Appendix D for the alternatives information. So if you haven't already, and alternatives is something that you're interested in and you want to dig into the details a little bit, those are two locations where you can find that information. And also you had mentioned the community meetings that CPRA is holding. So it sounds like you will be attending that. And if folks out there do have time to participate in those, I would suggest it. Again, they're not core meetings, and they're not associated with the EIS, but some of the feedback that you may give CPRA at those meetings may help them with their mitigation, being that they will be the ones, if the Corps can issue a permit for this project, they would be the ones to implement any of the proposed mitigation that you see in the EIS. So your feedback for them would be helpful. And just to go back and reiterate some of the comments that we received before we took our break today. We did get a passionate comment with good information, and just, want to once again thank people for providing comments that way. And that's why we're having these meetings. That's why you have members on a panel here from the Corps, the TIG, and CPRA that are, live and available to hear your feedback. So once again, that's appreciated. We also heard detailed comments about cultural resources. And for folks, I know the gentleman that was providing information was well versed, but for folks who aren't, who may want to take a look at that, our cultural section is in chapter 4.24. So you can find information about cultural information there. Also, Appendix K for more detailed information on cultural resources. And the gentleman who had provided that response brought up the programmatic agreement. And I do believe a draft is available there for folks to review and potentially comment if they see fit. Checking to see, it looks like the chat is still idle. So we can go ahead and, folks out there, if you do not want to speak live, the chat is available to you. So I would urge you that if you are participating this way and anything that we've said today raises issue for you, or anything in the document, to the extent that you've reviewed, if you want to bring something up there, please, either get in the queue to speak verbally, or again, we do have the chat so you can participate that way. Thanks.
So again, we are waiting for additional public comments. And to do so, if you want to do it verbally, you'll just need to type your name into the questions box to get into the speaking queue. I'll ask Ms. Soto if she could make others aware of this opportunity.
Ahora comenzaremos la sección de comentarios del público de la reunión. Cuando se registró para el seminario web, le preguntamos si quería hacer un comentario durante la reunión. Durante las siguientes 2 horas o más continuaremos con el seminario web para comentarios del público. Llamaremos a la persona por su primer nombre y al mismo tiempo el nombre de la siguiente persona en la lista, de modo que tenga algo de tiempo para prepararse. Cuando llamemos su nombre, quitaremos el modo mudo de su línea y tendrá 3 minutos para hablar. Gracias.
Thank you. Mr. Nguyen.
Khi bạn đang ký hội thảo trên web, chúng tôi đã hỏi bạn có muốn đưa ra nhận xét trong cuộc họp không? Chúng tôi sẽ tiếp tục chạy hội thảo trên web để lấy ý kiến công chúng trong 2 giờ tới hoặc lâu hơn. Chúng tôi sẽ gọi tên của người đầu tiên và đồng thời tên của người tiếp theo trong hàng để bạn có một chút thời gian chuẩn bị. Khi chúng tôi gọi tên bạn, chúng tôi sẽ bật tiếng đường dây của bạn và bạn sẽ có 3 phút để nói. Tôi sẽ trực tiếp dịch nếu bạn cho ý kiến bằng tiếng Việt. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Tay.
No pay the net showroom, just more showroom Sakazalaតាម internet នេះ យើងបានសួរថាតើអ្នកចង់ផ្ដល់មតិក្នុងអំឡុងពេលប្រជុំឬអត់ បើសិនជាអ្នកមិនបានចុះឈ្មោះពេលនោះហើយចង់បញ្ចេញយោបល់ក្នុងពេលនេះសូមបញ្ចូលឈ្មោះអ្នកនៅក្នុងប្រអប់សំណួរយើងនឹងបញ្ចូលឈ្មោះអ្នកទៅក្នុងជួរចាំរងចាំឲ្យយោបល់អ្នកមានរយៈពេល3នាទីសម្រាប់នឹងបញ្ចេញយោបល់សូមអរគុណ Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tay. And at this time, it looks like the speaking queue is without any speakers, and it looks like the chat, Mr. Laborde, is the chat still idle?
It does look that way. I do see we still have 89 attendees on, so we're here. Last time we engaged with the public was August of 2017. So we'll sit tight until for our allotted time here until 4. We'll be back tomorrow evening. So please don't be shy. It's good to hear different viewpoints, especially from the public. So chime in if you feel it's appropriate.
And as Mr. Laborde did mention, there's going to be one additional duplicate webinar, which is going to present the same information. And we believe it's important to have one of these webinars in the evening, as many individuals may be working at this time. And so 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. tomorrow evening, the same information will be presented. And so if you have any colleagues who would like to participate and could not because of work, tomorrow, April 8th, Thursday, April 8th, 6 p.m., this same webinar will take place. If there are any individuals who are just joining us, one of the things that we do want to remind you is that there are numerous ways to give public comment, and the public comment period is open until May 5th. If we can have the slide up that gives the multiple methods in order to give public comment. Giving verbal comment at this meeting is not the only method to do so. You can submit comments electronically at that first URL. You can submit written comments by U.S. mail to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, New Orleans District, at that address. And that needs to be postmarked on or before comment deadline, which is May 4th of 2021. You can submit oral comments via the toll-free number 866-211-9205. Again, you can submit oral comments via a toll-free number, which is 866-211-9205. Or you can do that at this meeting, which is April 7th, or tomorrow evening's meeting, April 8th. And you only need to submit your comments via one of these methods, as it will reach the public record. So again, if you wanted to give verbal comment, you simply just need to place your name into the questions box and you'll be put into the speaker's queue.
The chat was rocking yesterday. It's quiet today. I think we're a minute or two out from 3 o'clock. So I think if we don't get anything here in the next minute or so, we can go ahead and potentially take another break here, maybe till 3:15, if you see fit, Mr. Franklin.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to go on a break. The portal will remain open, and so nothing's being turned off. If you want to go into the questions box and place your name, we encourage that during this next break. If you want to send in the chat will still be active, and then we will call on those individuals who may be in the speaker's queue or respond to information placed into the chat during the break. So it is now 3 p.m. Central Time. We will go on to a break until 3:15 p.m. Central Time. So at this time, we'll go on to break. Thank you very much. All righty, so we still have a number of participants, but we have no one in the speakers queue. And I think no one in the chat at this time.
Okay, and before we took our break here, I said that the chat yesterday was rocking, and I realized during our break that some people may be feeling left out now. So during the break, I did learn that the first recording is available on the Corps' Facebook page. So if you do want to go back and review yesterday's meeting, that's available to you there. In addition, once the transcripts and these meetings are complete, they are being recorded and they will be available on the Corps webpage. So for future reference, they'll be there as well.
Okay. And so when we have webinars like this, it's really no way that we know if the 81 individuals who are online right now are the same 81 who were online early on. So please, I apologize for those of you who have heard us say, the instructions prior, but we'll just go through these instructions to ensure that we don't have any new participants who may not know how to actively engage. And so if you would like to make a public comment verbally, all you'll need to do is simply go into the questions box, and it's on the interface of GoToWebinar, and type in your name, and then that will place you into the speaking queue. And for those who may be of other languages, I'll ask Ms. Soto, followed by Mr. Nguyen, followed by Mr. Tay, to ensure that everyone understands how to engage the process. Ms. Soto.
Ahora comenzaremos la sección de los comentarios del público de la reunión. Cuando se registró para el seminario web, le preguntamos si quería hacer un comentario durante la reunión. Durante las siguientes horas o más continuaremos con el seminario web para comentarios del público. Llamaremos a la persona por su primer nombre y al mismo tiempo el nombre de la siguiente persona en la lista, de modo que tenga algo de tiempo para prepararse. Cuando llamemos su nombre, quitaremos el modo mudo de su línea y tendrá 3 minutos para hablar. Gracias.
Thank you, Ms. Soto. Mr. Nguyen.
Khi bạn đăng ký hội thảo trên web, chúng tôi đã hỏi bạn có muốn đưa ra nhận xét trong cuộc họp không? Chúng tôi sẽ tiếp tục chạy hội thảo trên web để lấy ý kiến công chúng trong 2 giờ tới hoặc lên lâu hơn. Chúng tôi sẽ gọi tên của người đầu tiên và đồng thời tên của người tiếp theo trong hàng để bạn có một chút thời gian chuẩn bị. Khi chúng tôi gọi tên bạn, chúng tôi sẽ bật tiếng đường dây của bạn và bạn sẽ có 3 phút để nói. Tôi sẽ trực tiếp dịch nếu bạn cho ý kiến bằng tiếng Việt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Mr. Tay.
ជំរាបសួរនៅពេលដែលអ្នកបានចុះឈ្មោះចូលរួមសិក្ខាសាលាតាមអ៊ីនធឺណិតនេះយើងបានសួរថាតើអ្នកចង់ផ្ដល់មតិក្នុងអំឡុងពេលប្រជុំឬអត់បើសិនជាអ្នកមិនបានចុះឈ្មោះនៅពេលនោះហើយឥឡូវនេះចង់បញ្ចេញយោបល់ចង់បញ្ចេញមតិសូមបញ្ចូលឈ្មោះអ្នកនៅក្នុងប្រអប់សំណួរយើងនឹងបញ្ចូលឈ្មោះអ្នកទៅក្នុងជួររងចាំនិយាយឲ្យយោបល់អ្នកមានរយៈពេល3នាទីសម្រាប់បញ្ចេញយោបល់សូមអរគុណ Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Also, while you do see representatives from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, CPRA, and NOAA, there are also individuals from many other organizations who are listening in on this process, and they are other Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group members, including the U.S. Department of the Interior, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They also have representatives who are listening in on today's webinar, and will also be participating in tomorrow evening's webinar at 6 p.m. And so again, if you have the email with the link to register for today's webinar and you'd like others to be engaged and to learn what you have learned today, we ask you to extend that invite to others. Okay.
I would remind those who are on the line still that, you know, if commenting today, either through the chat or verbally isn't your thing, we do have those other options available to you, whether it be traditional mail, our comment portal, or the phone. Those comments that you would provide there will carry equal weight to today. So just want to remind folks of that. As well as maybe bring up some of the main points that we hit on today. You know, one of the recurring things that we've heard either yesterday and today has to do with public flooding, or water levels, which is completely understandable, and remind folks that they can find that information in Chapter 4.20. That's the Public Health and Safety section. In Section 4.13 is the Socioeconomics section. In addition to that, we have a more detailed appendix, Appendix R, that talks about mitigation, and that there's adaptive management plan there for people to review as well. If you are concerned about mitigation due to water levels or any other you know, mitigative measure that CPRA is proposing with respect to this project to offset some of the impacts that you see in the EIS. I'll remind folks that if the chapters are a bit too detailed or the appendix is more than maybe what you're looking for, we do have that table at the end of Chapter 2, which is it's a summary of all the impacts that you would see in Chapter 4. And for a non-technical read, you can check out the executive summary, which is a condensed version of the EIS, which is quite lengthy. So if the large document intimidates you somewhat, I know that I have a printed copy and it is intimidating. The executive summary is available to you for review. If you did make a comment during the live meeting process, feel free to make more based off of the, you know, the other options that we have. You know, if you are currently reviewing the EIS, you're not finished with that review. If, you know, up till May 4th, if you have things that you come across that either raise question with you or maybe make you prompt you to make a comment, please, we urge you to do so.
And I know this is a little bit of awkward silence, but we want to give everyone an opportunity to sort of raise their hands virtually so that we can acknowledge them. Okay, seeing that the chat is idle and no one is in the speaking queue, again, when we go off of camera for break, the portal will remain active and open. And so if you want to make that verbal public comment, just simply type your name into the questions box, and that way we will have your name to call upon you. And you can also make your comment via the chat, and Mr. Laborde will speak that into the record. And so there's multiple ways you can participate during this opportunity. And of course, the screen shows you multiple other ways that you can comment. And the only date that you need to be aware of is the May 4th date. And if you mail a comment in, it needs to be postmarked before May 4th. And so at this time, I think we're going to go on a break until 3:45 p.m. It is right now 3:26 p.m. according to my monitor. And we're going to put a slide up that's going to say on break. But just please note that if you are one of the 73 individuals that is still logged on and you change your mind, simply put your name into the questions box and we will call upon you, and we return at 3:45 p.m. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're coming back from break. We want to thank everyone for participating in the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion virtual public meeting today. This is the second of 3 virtual public meetings for the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion Project. The first was on yesterday morning, today at 1 p.m. and then again at 6 p.m. tomorrow evening. And so we want to share that information to ensure that individuals are aware of these 3 opportunities to gain insights, gain new information, and to also offer public comment and or questions. So there's one clarification. If you look on this slide, about halfway down, it says mailed comments must be postmarked on or before the comment deadline of May 4th. And I just want to make sure everyone understands all comments submitted electronically or by mail via the U.S. Postal Service on or before May 4th, 2021 will be considered. And so we didn't want anyone thinking that if you waited until May 4th, it would not be considered. It will be considered as long as it is postmarked by May 4th. And so just wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page there. And to comment on the draft EIS or the NERDA RP, you can do it electronically. You can do it by written comment, U.S. mail. And I don't believe that there's a page limit when people want to submit by U.S. mail. And so maybe if you're a little long-winded, that might be your method. Submit oral comments via a toll-free number, and that toll-free number has a 4-minute time limit, and that's at 866-211-9205. And there's one additional meeting beyond today's meeting, which is at 6 p.m. Central Time. It will be a virtual webinar, as is today's webinar. Okay. So, Mr. Laborde, is there anything in the chat?
It appears the chat is still idle.
Okay.
So I see we're about 12 minutes out from our allotted time today. Since the chat is idle, and I don't think we have anyone lined up to make an oral comment, what we can do is roll through our close and just keep the chat open along with the webinar. If there are people who want to provide feedback, we'll be here. It's just probably prudent to wrap up at this time.
Okay. And so the portal will remain open until 4 Central. And seeing that there are no others indicating that they would like to make a comment at this time, we will move to our formal conclusion, but the portal will remain open until 4 p.m. And so thank you for your participation at today's meeting. If you find that you have additional comments or would like to make additional comments, or you were unable to make a verbal comment this afternoon, please note that you can do so in a number of ways, including regular U.S. mail, electronically through the online form, or by calling into a dedicated phone line where you can leave a 4-minute message. And that number is on the screen, 866-211-9205. We appreciate all the input that we have received thus far and will continue to receive through May 4th of 2021. As a reminder, the feedback you provide will be considered as part of the final EIS and restoration plan that is scheduled to be released in spring of 2022, which will inform the permit decisions that will be made shortly thereafter. Thank you all for attending this webinar. We will keep this portal open until 4 p.m. If you would like to put something into the chat. We hope you found this meeting informative, and we thank you for your participation. At this time, Ms. Laborde, at this time, we want our cameras to go off and we'll just keep the portal open. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct. We can do that.
All right. Thank you for your participation.